We talk about committing our life to Christ. Before you can commit your life to Christ, you have to surrender it first. And you're either all in or you're not in. You're either totally in or you're not in. It's a total commitment. He has got to become the number one priority and the number one relationship in your life.
Welcome to the Jesus Calling Podcast. Today's guests are two men who have learned about the power of choices, because choices can either leave us empty or allow us to be used by God for His good. Former WWE wrestlers Ted DiBiase and Marc Mero. Wrestling fans may know Ted DiBiase as the $1 Million Man, but today we get a look at the man behind the persona. Ted looks back on how his father, who was also a wrestler, influenced him to pursue the sport he loved. As Ted rose through the ranks and became a world-famous wrestler, he reveals how he got caught up in a destructive lifestyle that led him to the brink of losing everything that really mattered to him.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ted DiBiase, better known to some of you, if you're a wrestling fan, as the $1 Million Man of the World Wrestling Entertainment. I had a wrestling career that spanned some 19 years actively and another 6 years behind the scenes as a manager commentator, so a 25-year career. For the last 18, almost 19 years, I've been in full-time evangelism. I'm a father, a husband, and most of all, a follower of Jesus Christ. My biological father's name was Ted Wills. He was a professional singer. And I can't remember what year they married, but I was 2 years old when they divorced. And when they divorced, I went back to southern Arizona, where my grandparents had moved from Nebraska. This is my mother's parents. My grandmother ran a truck stop. Wilcox, Arizona, I'm telling you, has 3 traffic lights. I don't think it has, maybe 1 or 2 more now, all these years later, but it's a little town. And so I'm there from the age of 2 till 5, living with my grandmother. And I remember kindergarten a little bit, but then that's when my mother married Mike in October of 1959. And so this bigger-than-life man comes into my life and becomes dad. And he was a professional wrestler. Mike DiBiase had a huge impact on my life. He was a good dad, and as well as the wrestler, he was every bit an athlete as an amateur as he was professional. And the other thing that happened as a result of being Mike DiBiase's son was that I went to church. Now, like most Italians, my dad was Roman Catholic. So I, in my early years, was raised in Catholicism. I was the award-winning altar boy. I'm the guy who showed up at the 6 o'clock mass when there was 4 feet of snow on the ground, and some of the things that he instilled in me. And when I do school assemblies, I tell kids this all the time. I said, my dad always said this. He said, don't follow the crowd. Don't do what everybody else is doing, because 90% of the time, it's no good. He said, be a leader, not a follower. Be the head, not the tail. And he said, if you're willing to sacrifice, if you're willing to pay the price, he said, you can be anything you want to be in life. And I remember him telling me, he said, I don't care if you want to be a drummer in a rock and roll band. He said, if that's your passion, if that's what's in your heart, do it. Because if it's in your heart, then you're going to give it your all. But he says, if you're willing to make the sacrifices necessary to be successful, you can. And, it was evident in his own life. And then the summer between the 9th grade and my sophomore year in high school, we went back to Texas, and that's the summer my dad died, July 2nd, 1969. They wrestled in Lubbock, Texas, which is about 100 miles south of Amarillo. And I had gone to see a friend of mine play baseball, a guy who I had gone to school with and had developed a friendship with back when I was in the 6th grade. And so they dropped us off, and I remember when I got there that one of our other friends were there. These 2 ladies that were very close with my mom, whose husbands were wrestlers, and they said, Ted, is your mom, where is she? I said, well, she's taking a nap. We've been unpacking all day. She need to wake her up. And I said, what's going on? And said, well, we just need to wake her up. So I woke her up, and then one of the ladies took me down the hall outside, put me against the wall, and said, look, we came over here to get your mom. We were going to take her to Lubbock. Your dad had a heart attack tonight in the ring, and they were taking him to the hospital. But we just received another call, and that he passed away. I mean, it's surreal. I remember that so well. It's engraved in my memory. I remember I went and I stood at a plate glass window that overlooked the swimming pool in the apartment complex and just cried. Unbelievable feeling of loss. And my mother was just hysterical. If that weren't enough, I watched in horror as my mother sank into despair and alcoholism. I remember on the hard nights, a lot of weekends, I'd drive my grandmother's old Rambler out to the cemetery where my dad's buried and park the car, shine the light on his grave. And I'd pace back and forth in front of that grave and cry out to God. Ask God to give me help to, be the man that I wanted to be and to achieve the goals I'd set. My dad is gone. I won't see him till eternity, but I want him to be proud. Help me to, show my mom why she shouldn't quit and give up on life. I prayed prayers like that. So I didn't follow the crowd. I didn't party and get drunk on weekends and do all that stuff. Towards the end of my senior year of high school, that's when the ego started to rise. I was the first kid to ever graduate from this little school with a full scholarship to play Division I college football. I initially signed with Arizona, then I went to a school called West Texas State in the Texas Panhandle. Why? Back to Texas. A very influential wrestling family, the Funk family, were from Amarillo, and so I've known those guys all my life. I'm watching TV one day. I had already signed a letter of intent to play football at Arizona, and I hadn't seen any wrestling for 3 years. Since my dad's death, I hadn't seen any wrestling. And I'm watching TV one afternoon, and wrestling comes on out of Tucson. It's the tape out of Texas, and they're coming to Tucson. So I make the drive. I see these guys. I tell them what's gone on and what's happened. And one of them said, hey, look, even if you've already decided what you want to do, he says, I can get you a recruiting trip back to West Texas State. And if nothing else, just come back and see everybody. So I took that trip, and in reality, that's all it took. When I got to college, the pride of life took over, and I fell right in line. And to make a long story short, by the time I was 26, I had failed to complete college by a year. I had been married and divorced. I had a son from my first marriage, but by then I'd become a professional wrestler. I had been so faithful to my convictions until God gave me what I wanted. And it's as if I said, gee, thanks, Lord. I appreciate all your help showing up for me when I was crying in that desert cemetery and seeing me through all of this. But I got it now. And when I need you again, I'll let you know. Word's getting out, that I've got a lot of talent. And I wrestled in Mid-South quite a bit. Better part of the first 12 years of my career before the WWF. But in 81, in Atlanta, Georgia Championship Wrestling, I met Melanie. The last thing I was looking for was a wife or to fall in love, because I had been through a marriage that should have never happened, really. I had a son that I loved dearly but couldn't see except on weekends and special occasions. And then, because of the business I was in, I hardly saw him at all. But Melanie, Christian girl, and we just hit it off. That was like from day one. And we didn't do everything right either. 3 months after we're married, she's pregnant, and so our first son came in November 8th, 1982. 3 years later is when I got that call from Vince. WrestleMania 3 had just taken place, and they had set an indoor world attendance record, 93,000 people, wrestling. I mean, I remember looking at the front page and going, if I'm going to be relative in wrestling, that's where I'm going to do. I saw what was happening. When he contacted me, he said, I've got an idea, Ted. He said, it's never been done. He said, Ted, he said, one thing everybody hates is a guy who, by virtue of his wealth, thinks he's better than everybody. He looks down his nose at people. He's a bully. He bullies people with his wealth. He said, and in reality, all bullies are cowards too. You never get tired of seeing a bully get his butt kicked. And I started laughing. I said, you're right. And he said, well, that's the essence of this character. He said, in an effort to market this character, we're going to try to make the public believe you're really rich. I said, how are you going to do that? He said, well, we're going to fly you everywhere first class. Sometimes that's going to mean you'll have private jet service. You're going to have limousine service every day. Airport to hotel, hotel to Coliseum, back to hotel, back to airport. He says, and you're going to be making the kind of money where, I expect you to stay at only the finest hotels. We're even going to give you, he called it flash cash. This guy walks in the room and counts out $2,000 in brand new $100 bills. And he says, here's what I want you to do. He said, now, if you abuse this, you lose it. But if you do it right, this word will travel like fire. He says, pick your spots, go into a restaurant, and get up and announce yourself, and tell everybody it's their lucky day because $1 million man's picking up the tab. I knew when Vince offered me this opportunity that's what I needed to do. I said, I'm your guy. I'll sign the contract. The money was all written off as marketing. That's what it was doing. And you talk about social media, forget it. That word traveled like wildfire. This guy is really loaded. So you can imagine, oh my gosh. And I mean, I went from, driving my own car to riding around limousines and Lear jets. And wrestling is rising to a level of fame that nobody foresaw. And I mean, we were literally like rock stars, and we were living like rock stars. So WrestleMania 8 took place in Indianapolis, Indiana, March of 1992. And I was at the height of my fame. I mean, Learjets, limousines, action figures, video games, all that stuff was starting to happen. And I went out after the WrestleMania that night on the town, dressed in a tailor-made suit, beautiful girl on my arm, hit all the hot spots in Indianapolis because I'm cool. I'm the $1 million man. Boy. So I don't even go to bed. I mean, I had the limousine take me to the airport straight from a bar. Flew to Detroit, checked into the Marriott Hotel, and then went to a payphone to call home. What a nice guy, huh? Big surprise on the phone, though, that day. Down the other end, my wife now has discovered some of what's going on in my life. So I want to talk about it on the phone. I'll be on the next plane home. She said, no, you won't. You don't live here anymore. Click. First words out of my mouth, oh, God, help me. Talk about hypocrisy. Oh, God, help me. Next call I made is to the guy who's my closest friend and has been a mentor to me ever since. His name's Hal Santos. Hal's relationship with me was not based on performance. In other words, I didn't have to jump through a bunch of hoops. He didn't batter me every time that he got on the phone with me about, are you going to church? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? What I realized is the guy just loved on me. He was just my friend. He said, Ted, Jesus said the truth that set you free. Never said it'd be easy. Never said it'd be painless. Said it'd set you free. He said, if you'll trust him today like you did when you were a kid, when you were 15, he knew my story. When you go to that desert cemetery, he said, he'll hear you. He'll forgive you. He'll restore you. He said, he never left you. You left him. And all these years, he's been trying to draw you back. And even as I say that to you now, and I tell this story so many times, I almost tear up and cry because the realization that there's a God that big who could love me that much. And as I looked at my life and realized how many times I had abused that, just trampled the blessing, and you still love me, God. You know, God gives you that long, hard look in the mirror. I mean, you know, here, I'm at the height of my career. I've got everything that I ever dreamed I wanted. Plus, I've got this unbelievable wife and these 3 beautiful children. But I have no character. I have no integrity. I don't have the stuff that counts. And wow. That was the wake-up call. So going in to face my wife was probably the hardest thing I ever have done. It was the worst and best day of my life. I told the whole miserable truth and watched Melanie walk out of the room in tears, look back at me through tears and go, "Who are you? Where's the guy I thought I married? I'm about to get what I deserve," is what I thought. And it was a couple of days later, Pastor Hal had asked us to join him in his youth group and his wife and his daughter on this. They were going to St. Louis, and this was the weekend leading into Easter Sunday. So we got there, and I walked into this big ballroom, about 1,500 teenagers from all over the state of Illinois. They call it the Ascension Convention. The speaker that day is a wonderful man of God, and he can bring it too. It's Reggie Dabbs. He's really good. And so he gave his presentation, and then he came to the invitation. So if you're tired of living a lie and you know what you need, you know it's Jesus, then I challenge you to get out of your chair and get up here now. Well, now this is back when I had highlighted blonde hair, dark tan. I stuck out like a neon sign, and I heard it ripple through the room when I walked in there. WrestleMania had just taken place the weekend before. That's the $1 Million Man. That's Ted DiBiase. What in the world is he doing here? I look back at that and realize that God had me there for this purpose. He wanted to see if I'd bury my pride, my ego, which had controlled my life pretty much for 20 years. But I get in front of all those kids who recognize me as a television star and supposedly a, tough guy, and go forward. I beat them all to the front. I was the first man up there. I didn't just go forward, brother. I went forward and I dropped to my knees. I put my nose in the carpet and I cried like a baby. And I've never been the same since. I remember saying, "God, I don't know where we're going. All I know is this. I don't ever want to feel like this again. I don't ever want to feel this lost, this low. I know you have a plan for me. And I know you'll help me figure it out. That's where I want to go. You take the helm of the ship." And I remember saying, "I know I'm probably going to lose my family, and that's what I deserve. And even if I do, I'm giving you my word, I'll take care of it." But the biggest shock of the day for me was my wife. She saw all this. She had seen me cry the whole time. I mean, from the first time I laid eyes on her, because I did love her so much. I do love her so much, and just was, how, Ted, how could you do that? And she said this. She said, "I'm not going to make you a promise I can't keep. I'm not sure I'm strong enough to do this." She said, "But I serve a God of restoration, not divorce. I serve a God who says, forgive as you've been forgiven." She goes, I believe that you're sorry, Ted. Of course, I want to believe that you're sorry. And even though I believe that, I'm not sure I have the strength to stay. But because I want to be obedient, that's the word she used, to this still small voice in my heart, I'm going to try to give you another chance. We're coming up on 37 years. I made this list of the hotels in all the cities where I would be and the phone numbers so she could check up on me. She ripped it up, threw it away, and she goes, "I'm not going to put you on a leash like a dog." She said, "I watched you make a commitment to Jesus Christ." She goes, "That's your watchdog." She said, "If you wanted to do this again, you'd find a way. But know this, if you do, he will bring you down so fast your head will spin." And I mean, when I tell you the hair on the back of my head stood straight up, I was like, oh my gosh. Now there's a woman of faith. And so her faith was in him, not me. But as Melanie began to see my life bear fruit, she saw me get up. She'd get up and I'd be sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and one devotional after another. And she began to see me lead my family to church and lead my family in prayer. Jesus Calling is one that it's one of a couple of devotions that I do every morning. I use it in the morning. Sometimes I go back to it at night too. Let me bless you with my grace and peace. Open your heart and mind to receive all that I have for you. Do not be ashamed of your emptiness. Instead, view it as the optimal condition for being filled with my peace. It is easy to touch up your outward appearance, to look as if you have it all together. Your attempts to look good can fool most people, but I see straight through you, into the depths of your being. There is no place for pretense in your relationship with me. Rejoice in the relief of being fully understood. Talk with me about your struggles and feelings of inadequacy. Little by little, I will transform your weaknesses into strengths. When I went back to the WWF, I mean, man, I had changed, but the environment I was in had changed at all. So this was like, so by the summer of 1993, I decided I'm getting out of here, because if I continue this, it's gonna suck me back in. The most frightening thing I ever did in my life, to step out like that, walking away from the one thing I knew all my life, wrestling, and to be an evangelist, and talk about a pay cut. But it ain't about the money. It's about the fruit. Pastor Hal Santos, who's my mentor and one of my best friends, he said this. He said, "Ted," he said, "now there's going to be a lot of pastors find out that you're a Christian now," and he says, "with all the best intentions, they're going to want to ask you to come to their churches and share your story, your testimony." He says, "I just want to caution you right now," and this is right at the beginning. He said, "You're a baby Christian. In other words, give myself time to grow." He said, "Exactly." And I said, so I gave him my word that I wouldn't go until he said, go, or thought I was at a place where he thought I could. And the first time I ever did, I went to a little church in Paducah, Kentucky with him from St. Louis. We went together, and it's the first time I ever shared. It was a youth group. So these kids start coming up, and Hal looks at me, and I see him go. And I looked at him like, well, he says, "Go pray with somebody." I had never done it. Not in that kind of a setting, at least. And I said, well, okay. So I start to walk forward, and this, I'll never forget this kid. He had bright red hair, freckled face, hair to about shoulder length. And so he comes up, before I could even open my mouth, he throws his arms around my neck, buries his head in my shoulder, and he's crying. And he says, all my life, he says, my parents, my grandparents even, have tried to tell me why I needed Jesus. I just didn't get it. He said, but through your story tonight, I got it. Man, even now, that was the first time. The light went off. I went, oh my God. God just used me to change this kid's life. Brother, I have wrestled in front of 80,000 people at Wembley Stadium, and that is a pretty big thrill. Doesn't even come close to that moment in my life.
To learn more about Ted DiBiase, visit his website at milliondollarman.com. And to learn about where he is speaking next and about the Heart of David Ministry, visit heartofdavidministry.com. Stay tuned for our interview with motivational speaker and former WWE wrestler Marc Mero after a brief message about a free offer from Jesus Calling. Want a daily reminder that we can have hope, peace, and joy each day in Jesus? Now it's as easy as opening an email. The Jesus Calling Daily Email brings you a thought from the Jesus Calling family of devotionals every day. Brighten up your inbox with this little reminder and take a minute to connect with God during your day. To sign up to get your free daily thought from Jesus Calling, please visit jesuscalling.com/daily-email. That's jesuscalling.com/daily-email. Our next guest is former WWE wrestler and now motivational speaker Marc Mero. A talented athlete from an early age, Marc always had dreams of being in professional sports. As he acquired all the things he had dreamed of since he was a little boy, fame, wealth, status, he quickly realized his choices had consequences. After he realized he'd been dreaming of the wrong things, Marc took a long, hard look at what he was living for.
My name is Marc Mero, and I was born in Buffalo, New York. Grew up a big sports fan and loved sports, and was my passion growing up: football, hockey, boxing, lacrosse, and eventually became a professional wrestler. I first got introduced to hockey, and so I decided to play ice hockey. But the problem was I never skated before. I didn't know how to skate, so it caused a little dilemma there. So what happened was I decided to play goalie. And the one thing about goalie is you learn whether you have good reflexes or not very quickly. And I had really good reflexes, but I couldn't skate. And when I remember trying out for the team, kids would come up from behind me and hit me in the back of the skates, and I'd go flying because I couldn't keep my balance or anything, and kids would laugh and stuff. And unfortunately, I had to play goalie because that's the only position you don't got to really skate around to be halfway decent at, as long as you can make saves. Well, not only did I make saves, but out of 20 games, I had 13 shutouts. And now at the banquet at the end of the year, they announced the MVP for the league, not the team, the league. And they announced this year's 1972 MVP is Marc Mero. And I walked by all the kids that laughed at me, that knocked me down, that said you'll never be anything because you can't skate. And I was MVP. I think it really motivated me. You always want to be a part of things. You always want to be liked. You want to be, a good teammate or a good person. And I think because I wasn't good at first in sports, it made me work that much harder. And so it was a really defining moment in my life, because that summer I learned how to skate. Next year, I became leading scorer in the league. My first year of learning how to skate. So it was the beginning of really going after dreams and goals. My mom and dad had my older sister, Jody. I'm the middle child. And I have a younger brother named Joel. I'll never forget, I came from school. I was 8 years old. And I saw my dad's car in the driveway, which was really unusual because my dad didn't come home till like dinner time. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, Dad's home, so I was really excited. And I could run in the house, and my mother was sitting in the living room, but she had her head buried in her hands and she was crying. So I walked up and I said, Mom, what's wrong? And she lifted her head and tears were streaming down her cheeks, and she said, Marc, Daddy's leaving. And I was puzzled. I was like, where's he going? And I ran into my mother and father's bedroom because I heard my dad in there. And he had his back to the door, but he was putting clothes in the suitcase. And I stood in the doorway and I said, Daddy, where are you going? And he was startled. He turned around and he goes, Marc, I want you to know I love you so much. I said, well, where are you going? And he said those words I never forgot. He said, Marc, your mom and dad are no longer going to be together. And I remember just not understanding, but understanding that he was going and not coming back. So I ran over to his suitcase and I grabbed the handles and I fell to my knees and I started begging my father not to leave. I said, Daddy, please don't go. You're my best friend. And he just said something I never forgot. He pulled the suitcase out of my hands and he says, Marc, don't cry. Everything's gonna be okay. And he walked out the door and I was screaming, "Daddy, please don't go. You're my best friend." And he was gone. Now fast forward to my dad was in the hospital with lung cancer. And I remember that we got a phone call like 6 in the morning. They said, you need to get here as soon as possible. Your dad needs to see you. I ran into the hospital, took the elevator up to his floor and ran down the hall. And when I opened the door, I could see my dad wasn't doing good. And I remember just running over and getting in the bed with him. And I scooped my dad in my arms and I was holding him and he just was looking up and I just started crying. And my tears were coming out so fast, they were hitting my father in his face where it looked like my dad was crying. But the weird thing was I've never seen my father cry. But for the first time, it looked like my dad was crying. And then I remember what he said to me when I was a little boy. I said, "Daddy, please don't cry. You're my best friend. Everything's gonna be okay. Don't go." And he died in my arms. And it was so powerful that I never forgot that. When I share that story, many kids I meet or many people I meet that lose a loved one, especially a mom or dad, the pain that you feel is something that's hard to explain to someone unless they've been through it themselves. But to this day, I always say that the memories are worth the pain. When I was a little boy, I have this little book that I still carry around today to my presentations. When I was 10 years old, I'd write my dreams and goals into existence, And, many of them were like, so just aiming bigger than life. I mean, I was going to find the cure for cancer. I was going to find, I had all these dreams and goals that I write down as a little boy, and I often tell kids that failure is not aiming high and missing. Failure is aiming too low and hitting. And I just say, dream big, aim high in life, But I write down things like, I want to be a millionaire. I want a black Cadillac. I want a speedboat. All these dreams and goals that I had as a kid, would eventually come true in my life, I'll never forget this. That I was one paycheck away from becoming a millionaire. In other words, when this paycheck hits my account, seven figures, you know what I mean? And I was so excited about it because it was like my whole life I dreamed about this moment, this time I'd be a millionaire. I remember telling my ex-wife and saying, this week we become millionaires. Can you believe it? We're so excited. And the check comes, I deposit the bank and it was like, yes, we're a millionaire. You just dream of like, that's gonna make you happy. And in all reality, it seemed to cause more and more problems. And not only was it the beginning to the end of my marriage, my relationship, and then walking away from Christ and becoming heavily involved in drugs again, and eventually wanting to end my life. It was Christmas, and I remember not having any place to go, nowhere to celebrate. And I already lost my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, and then my wife walking out the door and divorcing me. But Christmas Day, I decided to drive to Cocoa Beach, Florida, and I sat under the pier. I just watched the waves roll in and roll out, and I started thinking about my life. I was once rich and famous, and I had millions of dollars. I had it all. And here I am sitting under a pier by myself on Christmas Day. And I remember just thinking, I don't want to be here anymore. I retrieved my handgun, and I had this big walk-in shower, So I decided to go in there and end my life. As I was standing there, it's like my heart was just pounding. And I saw my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, and I just thought, wow, I just miss them so much. Everything I had is gone. And I remember, this is not where I want to go. This is not where I want anyone to go. And I fell to my knees, I pointed the gun away from me, and I just started begging God for forgiveness. I kept saying over and over, change who I am, and because my whole life was always trying to change everybody else, you should love me more. Don't you know how to cook dinner? What's wrong with you? Can't clean the house the way I want to clean, Always trying to change it, but when you realize it's you that has to change, everything around you starts to change, The tallest I ever stood was that day I got down on my knees. And my whole life changed. Now, like I said, didn't change just overnight. I never did drugs again. This is the most amazing thing was I never touched an illegal drug since that day. And have lived just little by little, things start coming back,
As Marc began to rededicate his life to God, he started to see huge changes in his world. He opened his heart to his now wife of 10 years, Darlene, and together the two of them began Marc's ministry, Champion of Choices, where Marc speaks to children in schools across the United States and the rest of the globe. But Marc found that opening up about his story wasn't always easy.
I remember the first time I decided to speak to a school. One of the first times, okay? It was Lake Brantley High School. And I remember telling my wife, I said, Darlene, if I could just touch one person's heart, it's worth it for me. And she said, you go get him, And I got up there and I remember I was like nervous and sweating. I mean, oh gosh, they say that the scary, they list 10 scariest things for a human being. Number 2 is death. Number 1 is public speaking. Yes. And I experienced it, right? And I started like, I want everybody to stay away from drugs and, be good. Oh gosh, it was just horrible. Kids were all talking, and anyways, the thing ends and my wife comes running up to the stage. She goes, honey, that was great. And I thought, I know it's like I was mad at her for even saying that. Like, did you not just watch what I just went through? But then I thought for a second, I go, oh my gosh, the one heart I touched was my wife. So the cool thing was, we went home and we started discussing what makes a good presentation. She goes, why don't you just tell your story? I thought, so we went and got pictures of my family and video, and I just said, let me tell my story. I do the next school and kids are in tears and people are writing to us and we're getting these letters, you changed my life. Then we got a letter, you saved my life. And not only from that, from the teachers and faculty were writing me, And then it just snowballed into this amazing, amazing ministry. And now we get, about 100 messages a day. And it's such a blessing. There's no greater joy than helping another person. You have to relive those moments, which are not fun to go back to, but knowing I'm gonna help someone today. I'm gonna let someone know that they're not alone and how much they matter. And that's what drives me. It drives me to know that God could use my story, my brokenness, to help somebody else. Man, we're all broken in some way. We all have stuff. And when you're not afraid to admit you have stuff and you're not perfect and you make mistakes, someone else will go, man, he's just like me, Maybe my life could turn around too. And it does. But at the end of the day, it really is just planting that seed and God watering it. God helping these people or helping someone that heard my story change their life. God has a plan and a purpose for each of our lives, not just every one of us. He's got a plan for us, We all go through hard times, We all go through storms in life, Some storms, you can just walk through them. Some storms you got to run through. But there are storms that come in our life that we have to hang on with everything we got. Don't let go and don't give up, because I promise you, after every storm, man, the sun will eventually shine and it's going to be brighter than you could ever imagine. And I would have never seen that sunlight if I would have gave up. Never would have known all the great things God had for me later on in life, New friends, new family, and marriage. I never would have met my wife, Darlene. I never would have had this amazing ministry. I never would have spoken over 1,000 schools around the world. You have God, your spouse, family, and then your ministry. You have to have an order of this thing. And I've been guilty of getting so caught up in maybe trying to help others that sometimes you hurt yourself or your wife or your family. And we all need time together. We have to have that time. Being on the road a lot, we always pray together. And she would send me Jesus Calling, and we'd read together our Jesus Calling every morning. So she would send it to me because she had the book with her. So she'd take a picture of it and send it to me, and we'd read together. And then, of course, we'd pray together. One of the passages I really resonated with me and is from July 13th. I can read it. I want you to experience the riches of your salvation, the joy of being loved constantly and perfectly. You make a practice of judging yourself based on how you look or behave or feel. If you like what you see in the mirror, you feel a bit more worthy of my love. When things are going smoothly and your performance seems adequate, you find it easier to believe you are my beloved child. When you feel discouraged, you tend to look inward so you can correct whatever is wrong. Instead of trying to fix yourself, Fix your gaze on me, the lover of your soul. Rather than using your energy to judge yourself, redirect it to praising me. Remember that I see you clothed in my righteousness, radiant in my perfect love. And I'm guilty of judging myself, a little hard on myself sometimes, And when I stop worrying about, if I'm gonna do okay today, or am I gonna be able to help somebody, or did the presentation go smoothly, or whatever it is, stop beating myself up and just realize, man, he loves me. He put me on that stage. He put me in this position in life. Stop beating myself up. And I think many people do that. I think many people are guilty of just being too hard on themselves. And when you're hard on yourself, you have to learn to love and value yourself, because you can't give away what you don't have. So it's so important to understand that God made you just the way he wanted, and he doesn't make mistakes. So we all have something about us we don't like, but God made you that way. He made you so perfectly in his eyes, and he sees that radiant, perfect love.
To learn more about Marc Mero and his Champion of Choices ministry, please visit thinkpause.org. That's thinkpos.org. If you or someone you know may be considering suicide, contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or the Crisis Text Line by texting HOME to 741-741. Next time on the Jesus Calling podcast, we're celebrating National Pets Day and talking about the joy God gives us through animals. We'll hear from Lavon Redferrin, the Executive Director of Proverbs 12:10 Animal Rescue, who shared a special program that blesses puppies and people.
We are partners with the Davidson County Sheriff's Department's inmate program called Second Chances, and these are nonviolent offenders, women, who are incarcerated. They have no history of violence. They're usually drug charges or something to that effect, and they're trying to get their lives back in order. And they foster puppies for us. And those puppies are such a blessing to them. Each time one is adopted, they write a letter that goes with the puppy, and invariably it will say how that animal has blessed them or taught them patience or given them something to wake up for inside those bars. So we're thrilled with that, because obviously we're an animal rescue, but anytime we can bless people, that's even a better thing. It's a double blessing.
Do you love hearing these stories of faith weekly from people like you whose lives have been changed by a closer walk with God? Then be sure to subscribe to the Jesus Calling Stories of Faith podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you like what you're hearing, leave us a review so that we can reach others with these inspirational stories. And you can also see these interviews on video as part of our original web series, with a new interview premiering every other Sunday on Facebook Live. Find previously broadcast interviews on our YouTube channel, on IGTV, or on JesusCalling.com/video.